first ever episode of Metahuman Media Reacts. We'll be discussing our thoughts on X-Men Apocalypse. Given that this is the first ever episode, we'll get some introductions out of the way first. My name's Greg Smith. I'm here today with Kevin Allen.
Hi.
And Christopher McDonald.
Yeah.
The aim of this, each week we're bringing a wide variety of content for your viewing pleasure. So let's get that right out of the way and let's just get this started. Chris, what were your thoughts of the film?
I enjoyed the film overall. There's definitely aspects of it that are well done, quite easy to connect with, but overall it does have a lot of problems as a film that do pull it down quite a bit for me.
Sure, and Kev, do you share these opinions?
I do, yeah. On the whole, I liked it, and I do think that it's one of those movies that's more than the sum of its parts. I came out of it really feeling like I'd enjoyed it, but it's one of those ones that on further analysis, you do realise it had quite a lot of problems.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's a lot to speak about in this film, and we'll get right to it. So, Chris, we'll just talk about the positives. Just share your thoughts, first of all.
One thing that did stand out to me quite early on in the film is, that whole opening part with Magneto's family and him trying to build a new life for himself, just try to set out, create a different identity, and move away from who he'd been before. And it is something we had seen in the comics, and it was quite nice to see it in live action and see him go for it, and just see Magneto try out being someone else and see how that works out for him. One problem is I do feel like it is a bit underdone. Like, the film does lose thread of it later on, and it comes back to at the end with Magneto questioning if he can really ever be anything but Magneto. He's tried it and the war's not let him, and I did like the question of it, but the film does lose thread of it, unfortunately. But when it was there, it was quite well done, I felt. Quicksilver as well, his whole journey with him and what he wants from the relationship with Magneto. He's come to realize this man's his father, but this man is almost like a terrorist, and he has that to the world he is, and he has that conflict of, it's not the kind of father figure someone wants, terrorists, but it's the father he has, and he's got that conflict over, does he want this? Does he want to pursue this relationship with Magneto? It is his father, but so the journey and conflict he had, and that driving him and carrying him through the film, I did feel that was quite well done. I would like to see that again and be taken further. And to be honest, Quicksilver's the whole generation that are coming in alongside Quicksilver, I did find them quite likeable, and seeing them get the new colourful costumes, which is something has been missing from X-Men, was great. And I did think they had a good chemistry together. I just wish we'd gotten more of them, really.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's something, more of that to come, certainly is what we're looking forward to. You were speaking of, new costumes and things. Certainly we'll be looking forward to that in future films. One thing that we were used to seeing in all of these X-Men films is Wolverine as the main character. Certainly that wasn't the case in this film. More so than his cameo, obviously, in First Class. This was an entire scene dedicated to Wolverine, and of course the Weapon X sequence. So leading up to this, obviously, we were unsure of what we were getting here. Were we going to get the full scene from the comic where he lashes out at everyone? Is he going to look like Weapon X Wolverine? We had no idea. So I was pleasantly surprised. I really, really liked what they'd done. He just looked exactly like he came out the pages of the Weapon X comic. He had the visor, the headgear, the wires, everything, right down to the T. It was perfect.
And after never really getting, Wolverine wearing any of his costumes in the film, to finally get him naked, I guess, it was great to see, and to see, him actually look like he has in the comics at some point.
Yeah, I mean, this was, like I said earlier, this was like straight out of the pages. It jumped out right at you. And obviously the Wolverine, that was, the X-Men movies themselves have not been violent. There hasn't been a whole lot of violence. The Wolverine, obviously there was a lot of that, of course. But as far as the normal X-Men films go, I'd say the Weapon X scene when Wolverine, does lash out, showing some of that berserker rage that we haven't really seen from Wolverine before. It's definitely one of the most violent scenes in an X-Men film. Obviously, the fact that the next Wolverine film is rated R certainly will expand on that. But to me, that was just very, very well executed. I couldn't really ask for more with regards to that scene. So, what about yourself, Kev?
Yeah, I loved that. Speaking of great execution, I think in terms of what we've come to expect, I thought that McAvoy and Fassbender were incredible once again. Uh,
Yeah,
Definitely had less screen time together in this one, which I felt was unfortunate. But the moments that they share together are great, and it really did remind me of how brilliant they've been together. That magic, that spark was just there once again with those two. Um, and I do think it's unfortunate that there wasn't so much of them in this, because I think when this franchise, at least in terms of the last three films, when it really sings, it's when those two are on screen together. So that was definitely probably the main takeaway for me in terms of what I really liked. I do think that it's something that if those two are to sign on again, I would really like to see more of them in future, because Magneto in this film did get relegated a bit to the sidelines after
yeah.
having an initial scene, actually section that showed, as Chris mentioned, his attempt at a real life. After that, he does sort of fade away a bit, which was unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like what you were saying there about the future films, we need McAvoy and Fassbender. You can't really have the next X-Men films without those two. Certainly, it would be an interesting take, but no, I'd sign up for what we've had. As you said previously, they've been great. Their chemistry is great together. So I'd sign me up for more of that. So yeah, there are a lot of things in this film that we enjoyed, but unfortunately, there was more that we didn't enjoy. Certainly, from my point of view, and from a lot of other people that I've spoke to as well. Chris, what didn't you like about it? I mean, what made your blood curl?
I think the film's biggest problem really is just that everything in the film is underdone. Practically everything is just, it's trying to do too much, and it means that nothing really gets time. Like it's trying to be a send off to what these films have been since First Class. It's trying to bring in a new generation. It's trying to give us more of McAvoy and Fassbender together, as has been the standout of the previous two films. Um, it's trying to tackle the big apocalypse storyline, delve into his past and the kind of the sway he has on people, and as an end result of just trying to reach out and tick every box, it kind of manages to just not really do any of them well, unfortunately. There's so little done with Newcast. Like, they're likable, they get a bit of team building, but it's so throwaway. At the end, you feel like you don't really know them.
Yeah,
Magneto's story starts out really well, and then just the minute Apocalypse approaches him, that entire story thread almost gets completely lost. And he's just there as a plot device through which Apocalypse is going to destroy the world. And then at the end, it sort of comes back to him having that question of, can he be anything else? But the film's lost so much of that plot thread, and the question's so quick that it doesn't really come off as much. First Class comes back, but it's so token, there's not really much to appreciate. It's just trying to appease too many wants, and although one thing that did almost get overdone was Quicksilver's scene where they're trying to call back to Days of Future Past, because Quicksilver was far and away, breakout character from Days of Future Past, and there's that central scene he has that blew everyone away. But what was so special about that scene is we'd never seen anything like it before. It was quite new and fresh. It was quite an original way to depict a speedster's power. And I feel like they thought people needed that again, and they needed to top it. And they seem to think that more is better, and really all it was is that more is more. It was somewhat more elaborate in some ways, but it was less intricate, and it wasn't quite as tightly designed. And the placement really was the biggest problem with it for me. These scenes are meant to illustrate how different the world is for Quicksilver. So what's kind of cool about them, that these moments that are quite intense and scary moments for other people aren't so serious for Quicksilver, and you have that great contrast, that dichotomy between seeing the scene before, and then you switch to Quicksilver's music, the world slows down. He treats the situation quite flippantly, and it's a great contrast. The problem is that in Apocalypse, the moment they choose it with it is too serious and it's too tonally jarring for the audience to take you from the X-Mansion exploding and then putting you in that Quicksilver scene and then coming back to, yeah, a guy's dead. It's just too tonally jarring, and I feel like just even trying to replicate it in such a one-to-one way was a misguided effort, and it definitely was an error to place it where they did in the film as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you said there can really be said for a lot of third movies in the trilogy. The last one, they always try to tend to do too much. They overdo things, and a lot of the time it results in a bit of a mess. I mean, certainly I can't really think of a third entry in a franchise that was truly great. There's not many examples there, of course, that have been better than the previous film, and this certainly wasn't that. Ironically, as well, there's the scene where they're talking about the third movie is never normally as good, and then they come out of Return of the Jedi,
Yeah.
of course, and they're not too fond of that. So yeah, that seems to be a recurring thing with these third films. They never really just seem to match up or live up to the hype that's always building them.
Definitely.
Of course, leading up to its release. I mean, so Kev, we'll take to you about this. I mean, what didn't you like about it?
Chris kind of alluded to it in terms of with Magneto and how his thread sort of fizzled out once Apocalypse approached him. I felt like in general Apocalypse had a bad effect on other characters in this movie. The way that the Horsemen themselves are handled I thought was really poor because they're essentially just blank slates. And I thought that's unfortunate when you have Storm that we're seeing young Storm for the first time ever. And then also when we're seeing Psylocke and Angel, two characters that have infamously been treated badly by the franchise in the past. And then Magneto, essentially the MVP of the franchise at this point. And just to relegate him to being a bodyguard, I thought was a huge mistake. To not use the character of Magneto and the acting of Fassbender to the potential that it has. I don't really understand that decision. I thought it was just unfortunate as well for those other characters because they don't get a chance to make an impression on you at all. By the end of the movie, Psylocke and Angel mean nothing to the viewer. You aren't really left with anything. Storm gets slightly more but doesn't really fare well either. And to me, I just feel like those characters really represent the movie in a lot of ways with how underdone things are and the fact that very few things seem to get the time that they deserve. They definitely tried to fit too much in. Another thing that I felt was really underdone, and as a fan of this decade it was really disappointing, was the 80s setting. In First Class it really handles the 60s well, and then Days of Future Past took it even further with the 70s, and it just oozed that 70s style. It was written all over that movie.
Yeah.
It really portrayed that decade in almost everything it did. The 80s doesn't fare well at all in Apocalypse. It's just one of those things that if it wasn't for a few small things, such as how Jubilee looks or some minor things, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
The 80s. It could really have been any decade, and I just thought it was really unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the main standout scene for me that made it just let the audience knew that it was the 80s was that Quicksilver scene where the music comes on. Literally, apart from that, like the things that you've mentioned, there's a few costumes, and there was that scene, when the mansions exploded. The aftermath of the Quicksilver scene where they're coming in the car and they're having that typical 80s kind of, that scene that's in every other 80s movie in the summer. That exists. So, but I mean, you can't really compare this film. It just seems like they've they just they swung and they missed.
Yeah.
It was just there was so much they could have done with this, taking advantage of that decade, and they just didn't. I mean, with the '60s dimmed to the dialogue from James McAvoy saying "groovy" and the Cuban Missile Crisis, and everything else that they showed in the '60s, they nailed it. And then obviously going on to the '70s, like you said yourself, that just the opening scene with Wolverine waking up and that it was just done, executed perfectly. But this, it just left you like, wait a minute, this was supposed to be the '80s.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like scratching your head. So I'm curious to the fact that they've announced that they are going to continue doing these next films, and it's going to continue the time jump into the next decade. So that'll be certainly something to look out for, and if they manage to capitalize on that decade and get it right. But one thing that stood out to me, and this is again on the topic of swinging and missing, was they had the potential to really explore a new plot line with Mystique at the end of Days of Future Past, as it's shown that it's her and not Stryker that's captured Wolverine. So that could have opened up a whole lot of different stories to explore in this movie, but instead, Bryan Singer and Simon Kinberg have just decided, oh, you know what? Let's scrap that. Let's pretend that the fans and the audience just forgot it happened, and
Yeah.
we remember very well, and we're expecting it.
I
I
do
just feel
think
let down by that personally.
I do think the problem there is that with Days of Future Past, all they were thinking with that scene was to give Wolverine a happy ending. Like it was being a big send off to where these films had been before that, and that film could have been the ending of the franchise. And they definitely wanted a happy ending for everyone, including Wolverine. So I think the thought behind it wasn't future potential, but just how to give Wolverine a happy ending. The viewers think he's going to have to go through all that Weapon X tragedy again, and then you see, oh, but Mystique, then you flash to him in the future, bone claws, and you get the relief thinking, oh, he's managed to miss out, not repeating all that tragedy. You have the happy feel for Wolverine. Then when the new film rolls around, they realise they don't really want to commit to dealing with Wolverine that's not gone through all that because it's less interesting, so it just kind of got abandoned.
The thing is, though, Mystique and Wolverine weren't exactly a match made in heaven. They weren't best of friends either. So that, to me, I don't know. I just didn't think the audience would automatically assume that, oh, just because Mystique's got Wolverine, that's he's in the safe now. He's in the clear. It could have meant a number of things, and that's why I was excited about that ending. It literally could have meant so many things could happen going forward, but they just decided not to mention it at all. But I mean, that to be in a way, you can make the argument that it's good that they didn't really explain it. They left it up to the viewer to really make their mind up what happened exactly. But you knew one way or another that Wolverine was going to get the metal claws. Weapon X was going to happen. It's just a matter of when and how. Really, they could have maybe went about it a different way, but I'm glad they didn't because, like I said earlier, that Weapon X scene was very good. But again, we'll see how it plays out going forward. I'm sure there'll be a few more twists and turns that they can throw at us and keep it fresh. But there you have it. That's our thoughts anyway on X-Men Apocalypse. So yeah, that's what we thought. There were things we liked, things we didn't like, but that was our reaction to the film. So let us know what you think. Leave your comments below and stay tuned for more videos just like this one. Coming up, we are going to have another video speculation, of course, on the next X-Men film, which will be set in the 90s. So we'll talk about that and a lot more here at Metahuman Media. So as always, like, comment, and subscribe. And of course, thanks for watching. Yeah.